if you make enough money, you could get this house, you can get this car, you can get and you get the things, but it's like, no, well, that's not the latest version. That's not that's not the creme de la creme. You're not the best yet. You got to get this. It's the whole idea of marketing, right? And some things will practically demand that we worship and follow. God doesn't demand, but he gives us opportunity. And he allows us to make a decision for ourselves. I've told this story before, but I think it bears repeating. A good friend of mine, he and his wife, they both had jobs, and they were doing very well. Paid their house off. They enjoyed we call a higher standard of living, right? And they didn't make a lot of money, but they made enough money, and they didn't have kids. And then, as they were getting past the child-rearing years, they're going to have a child. And he told me, he said, quite honestly, he said, I was kind of concerned about what my life might be like now. Because now I've got responsibilities. Now, we're not going to be able to spend the nights out as late as we used to. We're not going to be able to do the things we used to do. And he said, I felt that all the way until the time that my child was born. And he said, suddenly, we did things as a family. No, we didn't spend as much. We actually saved more. And we had more fun. I think a lot of people look at that as following Christ. They're afraid to follow Christ because it may limit their fun. It may limit their lifestyle. But what Jesus will teach is he provides what we need. And when you join the family of God, you can have a lot of fun. And you don't have to feel guilty about it because it's shared. And you feel loved back. And nothing is required except that you love Jesus, right? That you love your neighbor as yourself. We'll look at Daniel chapter 3. It talks about an image of gold. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and the width of 6 cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Dura to provide the province of Babylon. And King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather together the satraps and the administrators and the governors and the counselors and the treasurers and the judges and the magistrates and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps and the administrators and the governors and the counselors and the treasurers and the judges and the magistrates and the officials of the provinces gathered together in the dedication of the image that was King Nebuchadnezzar. He had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And then the herald cried aloud to you as commanded, O peoples and nations and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, of the flute, the harp, the lyre, the psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately in the midst of the burning of the fiery furnace. A little bit of peer pressure, right? So at that time, when the people heard the sound of the horn and the flute and the harp and the lyre and symphony with all kinds of music, all the people of the nation and languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Everybody did it. It's just expected. You're going to. King said. All the cool kids are doing it these days. Bow down. But I don't believe in that image. It doesn't matter. Bow down anyway. But I don't want to. Everybody's doing it. You got to. Daniel's friends disobeyed the king. And they refused to bow down. And they knew what the penalty would be. They knew they would face a furnace that would burn them literally alive. If we skip to verse 16, it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter of why we don't bow down, I added, for context. If that in the case of our God we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor do we worship the gold image which you have set up. Did they know God would deliver them from certain death? No, they did not. They did not know that. They knew he was able to. And a God who is able to do that kind of thing, they don't want to meet him on the other side and say, well, I was a little afraid. I was a little afraid. In fact, I was a lot afraid. When we face our trials and when we are tempted to bow down at the altar of whatever it is, we're afraid not to. We're not afraid of a fiery furnace, but we are a little afraid of what it might mean. What will that mean for my kiddos? What does that mean for my reputation? What does it mean for my job? Question is, do you love Jesus? Jesus asked Peter that question, do you love me? And Peter said, you know I do. And Jesus asked him again, do you love me? And he's like, sure I do. Jesus asked him again. Why did he ask him 3 times? Well, you can go into the Greek and you can understand that they were talking about 2 kinds of love there. That's true. But why did he go through all this? Because he knew that Peter one day would be asked to give his life. Will you be asked to give your life? Probably not. But your life doesn't depend on it, your soul does. Eternity is a really long time. Remember an illustration one time, I thought it was really good. They had a child come up and they gave him a little thread and they had him take it to the wall and tape it there. And then they had like 4 other kids and they took whole balls of yarn and they had them posted at the corners, and as they'd bring the yarn around, they would hold the yarn, and it would just all these different colors of thread would go around the whole church just until the yarn ran out. And they said, this little piece over here, this is your life. All the rest of this, This is a start to eternity. It's a pretty vivid reminder of where we have a few years to choose whom we serve. For whom will you serve? What's going to ultimately save you? And I think the thing that's going to help you, helps me, is to know that God is able. He's able to do all things. He's omnipotent, and he is able, and he loves you. Okay? Saved from the fiery furnace, Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed. I think the old King James says something about his countenance fell. He spoke and commanded that the heat of the furnace be turned up 7 more times than usual heating, and commanded certain mighty men of valor who were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. These men were bound in their coats and their trousers and their turbans and other garments, and were cast in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because of the king's command was urgent, the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame of the fire killed those who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So get the idea of that heat, right? The people who were taking them to it, they all died. They all died. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke to the counselors and said, "Did you not cast 3 men in the midst of the fire?" And they answered and said to the king, "True, O king." "But look," he answered, "I see 4 men walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." What fire are you looking at dealing with? What trouble are we facing? Are we limiting God? Are we putting our human limitations on a sovereign, all-powerful God? We've all had good friends in our life. And if you spend a lot of time with them, I can guarantee you one thing. Your best friend will let you down. They're going to. And they don't even mean to. They're going to let you down. They're going to disappoint you. You're going to need them somewhere, and they're not going to be there. You're going to think they're going to answer one way, and they're going to answer the other way. And you're going to feel hurt, and you're going to feel bruised. And so we say, okay, well, Jesus is my friend. Times are going to get tough. I know what my friends have done before. Don't layer that on Jesus, because he didn't do that, right? He's perfect in all his ways. When we do things right for one another, we're imitating that part of Jesus. God will see you through. And when you have him, you don't have to have all the other things to go with it. You may be blessed with some good things. The difference is, if you lose them, you're not going to be destroyed. Paul Overstreet had a song years ago, and it talked about going out to the well one morning, how he depended on that well. And one morning he went out and the well was dry. So what are you going to do? Well, you pick up your shovel and you dig another well. If God provides once, he can do it again. These men trusted him to go into a furnace so hot that it killed the guards taking them to the place. They were mighty men of valor. They didn't walk away. Rest assured, no matter what we're facing today, our God is strong enough, and he's big enough, he is willing, and he cares. You're a pretty important person. You're pretty high on his list. We have a word for that. It's called blessed. And I think if we really look at our lives, we can see lots of places where we shouldn't have walked away. And we did. For one simple reason. We're blessed. We're blessed. God didn't change. He's still just as strong and powerful today as he was then. Now here's the challenge. We've got to love him as much as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego loved him. We've got to trust him as much as they did. And we've got to follow through on our faith. It's one thing to talk it. It's another thing to do it. And one more piece. Don't use the failures of other people or the church or anything else that's human to point to how you think God might not be able. God knew we were weak, right? He knew we needed a lot of help. That's why he sent his son, Jesus. He gave us an out. He gave us a lifeline. Jesus gathered his disciples in that one room. Jesus, on that same night which he was betrayed, he took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it. And he said, "Take, eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same manner, he took the cup, and after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. This do ye as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat of this bread and you drink of this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." May God have blessing in the reading and the hearing of his word. Could we have the folks come now that are pre-selected? And Daniel, I would call on you to pray over the sacrament this morning. Amen.